My name is Vanessa, and I live in Atlanta, Georgia. Life here has always been a mix of challenges and hopes for me. I grew up in a modest neighborhood, the kind where everyone knows your name but struggles to make ends meet. My parents did their best to provide, instilling in me the value of hard work and resilience. When I met Carter, my husband, I thought I had finally found someone who saw past the labels of where I came from. He loved me for who I was, not for what I had or didn't have. Carter is the kind of man who believes in fairness and family, which is why he insisted we take in his younger brother, Ethan, when he hit a rough patch. Living with Ethan has been difficult. He's the exact opposite of Carter, prideful, sharp-tongued, and quick to remind me of my place. To him, I'm just the girl from a poor background who doesn't deserve to be part of his family. Ethan has a way of cutting me down when Carter isn't around, with snide comments or cold silences that linger long after he's left the room. And if we weren't already forced to coexist at home, Ethan and I also work in the same office. At work, Ethan is no different. He finds subtle ways to belittle me in front of others, always careful to keep his remarks just shy of outright cruelty when others are watching. But I've learned to keep my head down and focus on my work, until the day he went too far. It started like any other day at the office, quiet chaos simmering beneath the surface. I had just settled at my desk, a cup of lukewarm coffee in hand, when Ethan strolled in, flashing his signature smirk. There was something about the way he walked, chest puffed and chin high, as if he owned the place. Technically, he didn't, though he liked to act as if our manager answered to him. For the most part, I'd gotten used to his condescending attitude. At home, he tossed comments about my thrift store outfits or the cheap meals I made. At work, he'd undermine me in meetings, interrupting with, "Actually, Vanessa, I think you might be wrong," before twisting my ideas into his own words. Annoying, yes, but not unbearable. Until that day. It was just before lunch when it happened. We were in a team meeting, and I had spent the better part of a week preparing a presentation for a new client pitch. I practiced every slide, gone over every statistic, and even stayed late the night before to make sure it was perfect. As I stood at the front of the room, walking through the key points, I could feel my confidence building. People were nodding, taking notes, leaning in. It was going well. And then Ethan struck. He leaned back in his chair, a smug grin spreading across his face, and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Impressive presentation, Vanessa." It's almost hard to believe it came from someone who grew up scraping by on food stamps. The room went silent. My hands froze mid-gesture, the laser pointer trembling slightly between my fingers. I could feel the heat rising in my face, but I didn't know what to say. Should I laugh it off? Pretend I hadn't heard him? Defend myself? The eyes of my coworkers burned into me, their expressions ranging from shock to discomfort. Ethan wasn't finished. "Oh, and don't get me started on her cooking," he added, turning to the manager. "You should ask her about the time she tried to make spaghetti with ketchup." Classic poor girl move. Laughter rippled through the room, not from everyone, but enough to make me want to disappear. My manager, who usually kept a tight lid on things, shifted awkwardly in his seat but said nothing. That hurt more than Ethan's words. I somehow managed to finish the presentation, though I couldn't tell you how. My voice sounded hollow, robotic, as if someone else had taken over. When it was finally over, I rushed to the restroom, locking myself in a stall as tears streamed down my face. I thought about Carter, about how he'd always stood up for me when Ethan pushed too far at home. But here, at work, it was different. Ethan had power, not real power, but the kind that comes from charisma and connections. He'd been at the company longer than I had, and I knew speaking up would only make me look weak, or worse, unprofessional. When I got home that evening, I couldn't hide my emotions from Carter. He noticed the moment I walked through the door. "Vanessa, what's wrong?" he asked, his brow furrowing as he took my bag and guided me to the couch. I hesitated, but the words came tumbling out. I told him everything. Ethan's comments, the laughter, the humiliation. Carter's face darkened with each word. He said that, in front of everyone. His voice was tight, controlled, but I could see the anger simmering beneath the surface. I nodded. It's not the first time he's made digs at me, but today was different. He crossed a line. Carter didn't hesitate. "He's gone." "What?" "I mean it, Vanessa. He's gone. I've let him stay with us because he's my brother, but this? No, not anymore." Part of me wanted to protest, to tell Carter that kicking Ethan out wouldn't solve anything. But another part of me, tired, angry, and hurt, was grateful. That night, Carter confronted Ethan. I stayed upstairs, not wanting to hear the argument. When I finally came down, Ethan was gone, his belongings packed into hastily stuffed bags. For the first time in months, our home felt lighter. But I knew this wasn't the end. Ethan wasn't the kind of person to let things go quietly. A year can change a lot. For me, it was the difference between enduring humiliation and standing tall in a position of power. After Ethan left our house, life felt quieter, simpler, and a little more peaceful. Carter and I grew stronger as a couple without the constant tension Ethan brought into our lives. At work, I doubled down. Ethan's public disrespect had left scars, but they also lit a fire in me. I threw myself into every project, taking on challenges that pushed me out of my comfort zone. Slowly but surely, my efforts paid off. My ideas started getting noticed, and I earned the trust of my superiors. When the promotion came, I couldn't believe it. Me, Vanessa, the girl from nowhere, was now the head of my department. The new title came with more responsibilities, a bigger office, and the best part, authority over my former peers. I'll never forget the moment I walked into my new office, freshly painted with a shiny nameplate on the door. It felt like a victory, a culmination of every late night, every small success I'd fought for. But life has a way of testing you just when you think you've made it. It was my second week as department head when I got the news. Ethan was being brought back. The company had been struggling with budget cuts, and they needed someone to fill a mid-level position quickly. Apparently, Ethan had fallen on hard times after leaving our home. He'd bounced between jobs, unable to hold down anything stable, and had finally come crawling back to his old workplace. When I saw his name on the email, my stomach dropped. I'd worked so hard to separate myself from the version of me he used to belittle. Now he was coming back, under my leadership. The first day Ethan walked into the office, his swagger was gone. He looked thinner, his suit slightly wrinkled, and there was no smirk on his face. I could see the flash of recognition in his eyes when he spotted me, sitting behind the desk that used to belong to our manager. "Vanessa," he said, his voice almost hesitant. "Congratulations on the promotion." It was the first time I'd heard him say my name without a sneer. For a brief moment, I felt pity for him. But then I remembered every comment, every laugh at my expense, and the way he'd made me feel so small. I gave him a curt nod and went back to my work. Ethan wasn't used to being the one who had to answer to someone else, especially not me. It didn't take long for him to make a mistake. He missed a deadline on an important project, and I had no choice but to call him into my office. He sat across from me, fidgeting with the hem of his sleeve. I know I messed up," he stammered. "I've been going through some stuff lately." I raised an eyebrow. "Ethan, this is a professional environment. If you're unable to meet the expectations of your role, we'll need to discuss next steps." He looked up at me, desperation etched into his features. "Vanessa, please. I need this job. I know I've been difficult in the past, but I'm trying to change. Just give me one more chance." Hearing those words come from Ethan, the same man who once relished in tearing me down, was surreal. Part of me wanted to forgive him, to let him have the chance he was begging for. But another part of me, the part that remembered the humiliation he caused, couldn't bring myself to do it. "Ethan," I said, leaning forward, "do you remember what you said to me in that meeting last year? How you mocked my background, humiliated me in front of everyone, and made me feel like I didn't belong?" His face turned pale. "Vanessa, I held up a hand to stop him. "You don't get to explain. You made it clear how you felt about me, not just that day, but every day we shared a roof, every time you went out of your way to remind me I wasn't good enough for your family. And now you expect me to forget all of that because you're in trouble." He looked down at his hands, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry." The apology hung in the air, but it didn't carry the weight I wanted it to. It felt too easy, too late. "Ethan, I've worked too hard to get where I am. I've earned this position despite people like you trying to drag me down. I'm not going to let you use me as your safety net. You wanted to enjoy your rich life without me? Go ahead. Enjoy it, but you'll do it without my help." His eyes filled with tears, but I didn't waver. I stood up, signaling that the conversation was over. "You're dismissed, Ethan. Good luck." As he walked out of my office, I felt a strange mix of emotions: relief, pride, and a twinge of sadness. I'd always believed in forgiveness, but this wasn't about holding a grudge. It was about standing up for myself, for the person I'd become. When the door closed behind him, I leaned back in my chair, a sense of freedom washing over me. This was my story, and I wasn't going to let anyone rewrite it for their convenience, not even family. The day Ethan left my office for the last time, I felt something shift within me. It wasn't just relief, it was freedom. For years, I carried the weight of his judgment, his sneering remarks, and the belief that I had to prove my worth to people like him. But in that moment, I realized I didn't need his approval, or anyone else's. Life moved on, and so did I. The first few weeks after that confrontation were a blur of work, meetings, and deadlines. My team thrived under my leadership, and I began to find joy in the challenges of my new role. It wasn't just about the title or the paycheck. It was about knowing I'd earned my place, not because of where I came from, but because of who I'd become. At home, Carter was my rock, as always. When I told him about Ethan's plea and my decision to stand firm, he wrapped me in his arms and said, "I'm proud of you, Vanessa. You deserve to be happy, and you don't owe anyone anything." His words stayed with me, echoing in the quiet moments when doubt tried to creep in. I started investing more time in myself and the things I loved. I took up painting again, something I hadn't done since college. My evenings were no longer consumed by stress or tension. Instead, they were filled with color and creativity. I even joined a local art group where I met people who shared my passion and supported my journey. And my friends, they were my lifeline. Over time, I realized how much I'd isolated myself. First out of shame for where I came from, and later out of fear of judgment. But now, I surrounded myself with people who lifted me up, who celebrated my successes and stood by me through challenges. As for Ethan, I don't know where he ended up, and truthfully, I don't spend much time thinking about it. I hope he finds his own path, just as I found mine. But I've learned that forgiving someone doesn't mean letting them back into your life. Sometimes the best thing you can do, for them and for yourself, is to let go. Looking back, I'm proud of the woman I've become. I'm no longer the girl who flinches at insults or second-guesses her worth. I've faced my demons, stood my ground, and come out stronger on the other side. This is my life now, a life I've built with love, strength, and integrity. A life where I am no longer defined by my past or anyone else's opinion. And for the first time in years, I feel truly, unapologetically free.